You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
The Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF, hosts critical components of the global technology infrastructure, including Kubernetes, Prometheus, and Envoy. CNCF serves as the neutral home for collaboration, bringing together the industry's top developers, end users, and vendors, and running the largest open source developer conferences.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another on-the-road episode of the New Stack Makers. I'm Heather Joslin, Editor-in-Chief of the New Stack, and today we're coming to you from the floor of KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con North America in beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah. Today, we're going to talk about an open source project that recently reached graduation level from the CNCF, Cert-manager. 4 years ago, the CNCF accepted Cert-manager, a cloud-native certificate management controller for Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift as a Sandbox project, and in September it graduated. So happy graduation to Cert-manager.
Thank you.
What happened along that journey to graduation? What lessons have been learned by project maintainers along the way? What does Cert-manager do? Obviously, that's something we're going to learn about. And what are some of its most common use cases? And what's next for the project? We'll be joined by two people from Venafi, a cyber art company based here in Salt Lake City. We'll be joined by Matt Barker. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Venafi?
So I look after workload identity, which is in a cloud native world more often than not associated with a project called Spiffy and the associated implementation of that Spire. And all of that builds on top of the work that we've done with Cert-manager and how we end up adding value in and around workload identities and machine identities with Venafi and CyberArk.
Great. And we'll also be joined by his colleague, Ashley Davis. You're a staff software engineer at Venafi. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the project?
So my job consists of working on both Venafi products and being a maintainer for Cert-manager. So I'm one of the maintainers that's most active in the project. That's my sort of primary function, really, is to drive that and then build other software that builds on top of that.
Matt, can you tell us a little bit about what Venafi does?
Sure. Yeah, so if you think about the network, there's two actors on the network, humans and machines. And as an industry, we've kind of spent a lot of time thinking about how we protect and manage human identities. But there's not as much time and effort that's gone into thinking about machine identities. And machine identities over the past number of years, especially thanks to cloud native and moving to the cloud and microservices architecture and so on and so forth, have exploded. And so the volume of machines is just forever increasing. We think there's maybe 45 machines for every human identity in an enterprise network. And so because there's so many more machines, and they've got so many more different types of identities that we apply to them. It could be an API key, a Spiffy identity, whatever it is. You need to be able to manage those, and you need to be able to protect yourself from them, and you need to protect those machine identities. And so what Venafi and CyberArk does is it's an end-to-end machine identity platform, and that encompasses everything from PKI, enterprise PKI management, to certificate lifecycle management, to secrets management, to workload identity management. And we give you a way of making it very easy for developers and platform engineers to apply identities and manage them. And centrally, we can protect those identities and make sure that they aren't leaked, there aren't any problems, they're properly rotated, and you don't get outages from an expired certificate, for example.
Let's get started. I want to learn about this project. So let's start with what is exactly is Cert-manager? I talked a little bit about it at the top, but you gentlemen obviously know a lot more about it than I do. What does it do?
I'm well prepared for this because a lot of people ask this question at our booth here at KubeCon. When you're using Kubernetes, if you're a Kubernetes platform admin, say, you're used to writing YAML to describe the state that you want. And Kubernetes acts using tools called controllers to make that state match the reality. So people write YAML to get a pod, and Kubernetes will create that pod for you. Cert-manager essentially does that, but for TLS certificates, X509 certificates, the technical term. That's what you need to, say, provide encryption on your website or to do mutual TLS, where you authenticate the service that's talking to the server as well. So essentially, it's the easiest way to manage X509 certificates in Kubernetes.
And the project didn't start at Venafi. It started at Jetstack, which was purchased by Venafi in 2020. How did Cert-manager start it at
It's a little bit
Jetstack?
of a funny story.
Okay.
I was the co-founder of Jetstack, and when Kubernetes was open sourced, I got so excited about the potential of Kubernetes that we set up a company effectively to help organizations to use Kubernetes and containers. And because we were so early, this is almost 10 years ago now, not much existed around Kubernetes at the time, and we had to do things the hard way. So you had to build it from scratch, you had to implement it. There weren't many good add-ons. And so we'd spent about a year helping companies to install it and use it. But one thing that we always heard was an issue was managing certificates inside Kubernetes or with Kubernetes. We actually looked to hire our first engineer, and we thought, well, everyone's using Let's Encrypt these days. Why don't we create a little bit of an interview challenge? And we'll get this prospective engineer to automate Let's Encrypt inside Kubernetes. And so we asked him to do it on a Friday. He came back on the Monday with a working prototype. And he said, I've called it Kube Lego. So Kubernetes Let's Encrypt Go binary. And this is what it does. And me and my co-founder looked at each other and were like, wow, how's he managed to do this? This is absolutely amazing. So we hired him, obviously.
Yeah, that was my question. It's like, sorry, kid, sorry, kid, we the job is filled.
But can we take your project? No. So he joined us, and very soon after joining, we shaped it up, we polished it, and we open sourced it. And very quickly, we realized that we'd hit on a challenge that a lot of this community was facing. And so in those early KubeCons, I came to these events, and I'd get told by engineers left, right, and center that I'd save them so much time that I didn't have to buy any drinks or food all week because they'd save so much time in automating Let's Encrypt and certificates in Kubernetes. And so very quickly, the CNCF picked up on the project, asked us to do introductions to it and training on it and so on. And it just sort of grew very organically and naturally from there. It got to the point where we needed to make it certificate CA agnostic, so it was just for Let's Encrypt. And so we relaunched it as Cert-manager and made it CA agnostic. And the baton was passed to another engineer called James Munley, and he then grew it from there. And it was a point where it just became the de facto standard for doing certificate lifecycle management, to the point where it's downloaded millions of times a day, and it's a much loved project now in the ecosystem.
How was the decision made to apply it to the CNCF?
Yeah, so we thought long and hard about this, and it's such a fundamental part of the way that you think about Kubernetes. I mean, I'm told by a lot of engineers that once they've installed Kubernetes, the next thing they do is install Cert-manager. That it almost felt like it had to be part of the foundation, because it was just so naturally there already, as it were. I mean, some of our user research says that it's in between 80 and 90% of all clusters. We had amazing feedback from the community. We had a lot of contributors. Lots of companies built connectors for Cert-manager, and so there was already a really strong ecosystem around it. And we actually got acquired by Venafi, and we sat down and spent months thinking about whether we should donate it or not. And I think Venafi and Jetstack came to the decision that we should do it. It was going to be better for the community, it was going to be better for us, and it was almost like a worthy project enough to sort of donate to the foundation. And so we took that decision, and we never looked back, because it was the best thing we could have done.
Do you want
to add anything to that?
Yeah, is there anything you want to add to that, Ashley?
I can only say that I think it was an excellent decision. We do so much with the CNCF now, even during the graduation process. The part of that is the CNCF sponsor a security audit of an external company. That kind of thing is would be quite difficult for a sort of independent open source project to just do on its own. And we've got massive value out of that. We've got massive value out of all of the process, really, and it really has paid dividends.
Can you talk about, it's been 4 years since it was accepted into the Sandbox, and now it's graduated. What were were there challenges along the way?
There are certainly challenges. There's always challenges in everything, right? That's what makes life fun. I think one that jumps to mind is probably that with such a huge community of people using the project, you inevitably have differences of opinion on how to handle things. Say, for example, if we find something that we might be able to call a security vulnerability, but it's not the most critical thing in the world,
Yeah.
do we make a breaking change to do that? Do we interrupt other people's workflows to fix the problem and make sure it won't be a problem? Or do we accept it, document it, move on? There's no good answer to that necessarily.
Yeah.
And with so many people in these conversations, it can be hard to reach consensus. But usually we do get there sort of at the end and reach a decision that works well for everyone. I think we make more good decisions than we make bad decisions, I think. And part of the value of, again, the CNCF process from Sandbox to graduation has been that we've defined these processes and written them down, and the CNCF actually require that. So we have defined ways of reaching consensus on thorny issues. In that way, the CNCF has helped us to solve that too.
It's helpful to sort of donate a project to the CNCF, and then I think some of those challenges the CNCF helps you with almost, because they've been there and they've done it with so many other projects that they can kind of help you, guide you down the path and help you to sort of overcome some of those challenges. So they've been a great partner in working together and getting us to this point.
Yep.
Definitely.
What are some of the capabilities or features of Cert-manager in its most recent iteration that you want to highlight to people? Like what are some of the newer things that people might not know about?
So we're always developing, and that's always a good sign, right? I think what we end up talking about a lot now is not so much about Cert-manager, the core project, which is what 80-90% of people are installing, because it's rock solid, and to be honest, we don't need to make that many changes on a day-to-day basis to it. We need to keep it running, keep it updated, and that's really important. But we also have a bunch of other sub-projects that live under the Cert-manager umbrella, if you like. One of those is Trust Manager, which does what Cert-manager does, but for trust. We have also Istio CSR, which integrates with Istio. Obviously, a hot topic that a lot of people are interested in. A lot of the new stuff and the new work that we do is in these sub-projects in solving other issues relating to certificate management. So Cert-manager can issue these certificates and get the certificate that you need, but then it's like plugging that into the other projects that are out there, like Istio, like other service meshes, of course, and then being able to trust them with Trust Manager is a huge part as well.
Trust Manager, does that refer to zero trust, or that?
Not so much. So when you connect to a website, usually you don't need to worry about trust because it's baked into your computer or your server or whatever. That's not always the case if you're running, say, private PKI, which is something we see a lot at Venafi and CyberArk, where people are running their own certificate authorities to sign certificates. When they do that, they unlock a lot of cool features. They don't need to worry about rate limiting, things like that. And that can lead to a huge proliferation in certificates, but it also leads to a proliferation, it's a difficult word to say on a Thursday, in trust, which they need to know how to trust that certificate. So Trust Manager essentially helps with that. It stitches together trusted certificates into one bundle that you can then use to handle that. It's like the other side of the handshake. So the server presents its certificate, the client needs to know whether it can trust that, and Trust Manager handles the bit for the client there.
I think what I'm thinking about now is the impact of running Cert-manager at scale in big enterprises.
Yeah.
So Cert-manager is already part of the stack. It's already part of the furniture, as it were.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see companies now adopt and deploy to Kubernetes as if it's become the operating system of the cloud. So where else would you build your next application if it wasn't on cloud-native technology using Kubernetes and therefore Cert-manager? So we've seen Cert-manager and Kubernetes clearly proliferate through these enterprise environments. And that's all well and good. For the simple use cases like north-south, ingress, for example, all well and good. We've got that covered.
Yeah.
When you start to look at multi-cloud, when you start to look at service mesh, you look at east-west, mutual TLS, and all of those edge cases, it starts to become quite painful to manage and run. And that's where I'm thinking about how we can assist those enterprise users on actually making that process a little bit easier with some of the products that we offer and deliver. And so that's what I've really been thinking about. The other thing that I'm finding as well is that we built Cert-manager for developers and platform engineers. And so we built it into a workflow that made it very easy for them to use it, get started with it, get a cert, automate certs, and they've just run with it. And so they're building out these massive Kubernetes platforms. And right now what we're doing and spending a lot of time doing is educating security teams on the impact of what using Cert-manager does for an organization, and then also how to properly control it, manage it, and get get and discover all of those certificates and all those instances of Cert-manager. And so like matching all of the speed that's happening on the developer side, but with the safety that an InfoSec team can apply by properly controlling it and managing it.
It seems like multi-cloud and edge and so forth have really taken off in the last few years.
Yeah.
So it's a different environment entirely. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that large enterprises are using this. What are some of the most common use cases for this? I mean, for Cert-manager.
It's interesting that you mentioned multi-cloud there. I think that ties in really nicely.
Yeah.
A lot of large enterprises don't want to be tied to one particular cloud vendor. And part of the beauty of being an open source project is there's no need to tie yourself into any particular vendor.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything you might want to configure about Cert-manager is pluggable. So you can, if you're issuing from a CA inside your cluster, you can change that out for a CA from Venafi or from Amazon or from Google, and that's all perfectly pluggable. So what Cert-manager actually enables is to issue a configuration in one cloud, leave it there, and have a slightly different configuration, but still the same underlying tools. And that means you don't need to spend that much time setting up in a new cloud every time. When you start to combine that with other tools, such as like what Venafi provides, that enables you to then enable those clouds to talk together. So we hear a lot about Spiffy, for example. Cert-manager can actually natively implement pretty much half of Spiffy with no problem at all, because it requires X509 certs, and Cert-manager can issue those. So you really start to see these organizations that see a need for workload identity, machine identity. Cert-manager is already there, so it can be used straight away, and it can issue those identities and get you started with a migration to a universal identity system.
And that, to me, is really exciting. Because if you look at some of the challenges that these enterprises come to us with, they've got all these different identity types in these different cloud environments, so you end up with identity silos. And if you apply a particular solution for a particular identity type in a particular cloud, does that naturally translate to how you think about identity for your on-premise machines or your servers or your mainframes? And then you think about the complexity and scale and challenges of secrets management in the context of that, and scaling secret stores and how expensive they can be. Ashley mentioned Spiffy, and with the strength and connection we have in tying Cert-manager to Spiffy and being able to issue Spiffy identities, there's this growing world of workload identity management, and Cert-manager is going to play a very strong role in actually serving that new world, where we can help provide a very consistent way of thinking about identity across all these different environments, and solve some of these challenges with managing very complex secrets problems.
Well, we talked a little bit about what's ahead. I mean, is there anything else on the roadmap for Cert-manager, or you think is next that we haven't talked about?
Yeah. So again, another part of the graduation process is the CNCF actually require you to be quite transparent about the roadmap. They're obviously interested in vendor neutrality and ensuring that any one company doesn't have full control over what the project does. We used to have a roadmap that was in the Cert-manager repo, and it was kind of a few thoughts stitched together that didn't really impact our day-to-day. We've now moved that to a separate repo and defined a process for updating it and sort of taking suggestions from the community. So one interesting thing that's on there now is called ARI or ARI, which is sort of a process for improving renewal of certificates using ACME, or so like Let's Encrypt. Certainly in the open source, most of the people I talk to are using Cert-manager as a Let's Encrypt client. At the moment, it has to do some interesting stuff to check if a cert needs to be renewed. And ARI is actually a way of the server saying, like, oh, actually, this cert does need to be renewed. And that's going to be super interesting to work on in the near future, for sure.
Again, I think about it a little bit at a slightly higher level, and obviously Venafi was recently acquired by CyberArk.
Right.
And so we've been through the process of Jetstack being acquired by Venafi, Venafi being acquired by Thoma Bravo, and then now being acquired by CyberArk. And for me, like learning about the CyberArk suite of products and understanding that they started with privileged access management for IT use cases. They have a human identity solution. They have a developer identity solution. They have a secrets secrets solution in Conjure. Obviously now we have Venafi with the machine identity, and the work that we're doing to look into workload identity management. We have this like unbelievable opportunity to tie together identity for an entire organization. So how Cert-manager on the developer side and the Kubernetes and cloud native world ties back to secrets management with Conjure, through to workforce, through to PAM, through to human, like that's what I'm kind of really interested now in thinking about how we tie together with this unified identity platform. And so I think for me, that's where I'm thinking next. Is like, how do we take advantage of this amazing opportunity now to bring together all these great different technologies and provide that unified way of looking at it?
I think something that really illustrates that will actually be the challenges we're going to face in the near future with migrating to post-quantum cryptography. So quantum computers threaten basically everything that Cert-manager does, but also the security of the modern web by extension. And it's going to take a lot of work to be ready for that. We don't know if we're going to be able to build a quantum computer that actually could interrupt the web, but it could happen, and we need to prepare now. So part of the power of being part of CyberArk is that there's a huge amount of organizational knowledge there which we can leverage to sort of fix these problems and start to fix them now. We're going to tackle that at some point in Cert-manager when these things have only just been standardized, so it's going to take time, but we will get there, and that will fundamentally change the landscape as well.
And so you think they're about quantum safe algorithms? How do you know that a certificate has a quantum? Where are all your identities? And then when that time comes, when we figure out that RSA has been cracked or whatever it is, how do you then think about getting a handle on all your identities and then updating them with a quantum safe algorithm? That's very tricky to do. But that's quantum. So we're kind of preparing for that, and every CISO that we speak to is asking us about how we can help them with that. But that's one element. That's quantum. To bring it a bit more down to earth, there is also the nearer term problem of Google enforcing shorter life cycles on certificates. So we have 90 days. I think Apple also recently has shortened it to 45 days.
Something like that.
Or that's on the card. So there's just so much speed and velocity and agility. It's just like an absolute nightmare to think about how you manage all of these identities and machines when there's just so much happening, and they're so ephemeral and short-lived, and they're always changing, and certificate life cycles are being reduced all the time. And I think solving that problem, and then solving that problem of post-quantum, and doing that in a way that makes it easier for companies is really where we need to be thinking hard about. And I feel like that's what we're here to tackle.
Well, one last question: how can people get involved in the Cert-manager project?
Well, we're always looking for new maintainers, contributors. Basically, there's always work to be done. So we have a section on our website, cert-manager.io. If you just go on there and search for contributing, you'll see plenty of guides about sort of how to get involved with the process. As you can probably tell from the accents, we're actually based in Europe, so we have daily stand-ups on European time. Most people in North America will probably be asleep for, but we do have meetings every couple of weeks as well that anyone could join. And we get a lot of Americans that join that. That's a great way to get involved because it's good to be able to chat to people, see the face, onboard them that way. We also have Slack available for the open source project, which anyone can join in that way. Things like documentation, code fixes, new issuers, new Acme webhooks. There's always work to be done. And
I'll link to all this in the article that goes with this video. I think, unless you have anything else. You're good? Just
say a big thank you to all of the contributors, maintainers, the community, everyone who supported us along the way and put their trust in the project. Thank you very much for doing that, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% echo that. It's been fantastic to be part of this project. I've always had an affinity for open source, and to be involved in this is a huge privilege, and I've met some great people along the way as well.
Excellent.
So now we need to celebrate with some cake.
Yes.
Which we'll be doing later on today.
Absolutely.
Cupcakes.
Yes.
Obviously, it's the end of a very long journey, but it's time to celebrate what we've achieved with the project.
Excellent, and congratulations on your graduation.
Thank you very much.
And I guess that's a wrap. We want to thank Matt Barker and Ashley Davis of Venafi for joining us today. Thank you, gentlemen. We'd like to thank the CNCF for sponsoring today's conversation, and we'd like to thank all of you for joining us. This has been Heather Joslin for the New Stack Makers. We'll see you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.